The Senate Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Vice Chair Orenshaw. Here. Senator Goycochea. Here. Senator Daly. Here. Senator Krasner. Chair Flores.
Here. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please let the record reflect all members are present and we have a quorum. Welcome to everybody joining us either online, over the phone, or those of you who are present physically. Thank you for joining us today. We have 4 items on the agenda. We'll take them in the order they appear, which is a presentation by Carson City, followed by bill hearings on Senate Bill 16, Senate Bill 20, and Senate Bill 21. I want to remind folk to please silence your cell phones. I am doing that myself now. And remind folk that everything that appears on these screens we have in front of our laptops. Please don't take it as a sign of disrespect. If we are looking at our laptops versus the presenter, that's just because we're following along. I also want to remind folk that we'll be doing public comment at the end of the meeting today for those of you who wish to do that. And lastly, I want to remind folk that we will not be meeting on Friday so that everybody can plan accordingly. With that, we'll go ahead and open up the presentation by Carson City. And I'd like to remind you to please state your name for the record after any question that the committee may have, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Flores and members of the committee. I'm Nancy Paulson, the Carson City Manager, and I just want to thank you for having me here to present this afternoon, and welcome back to the snowy, icy, but beautiful Carson City. So just a little background on Carson City. Carson City is a consolidated municipality, and that was established in 1969. By consolidating Ormsby County and Carson City into one municipal government to try to avoid the duplication of services due to Carson City's very small geographical area. So although Carson City's population is a little over 57,000 and is similar to Lyon and Elko counties, at just 146 square miles, we are the smallest of all the counties in the state of Nevada, including Story County. So they're about 100 square miles bigger than Carson City. So the city's powers are contained in the Carson City Charter, which we'll be talking about after my presentation, and they're in addition to all the powers granted to a city and a county according to Nevada revised statutes. So the city is governed by a 5-member board of supervisors. We have Mayor Bagwell and supervisors Giome, White, Horton, and Schutte. They represent Carson City's 4 wards. Although the supervisors are elected at large, they must reside in the ward that they represent. Carson City is a council manager form of government where the board is the policy-making arm, and the city manager is the administrative and the operational arm. So I'm appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and in turn, I'm responsible for appointing the deputy city manager and then 8 different department directors. We also have 5 city offices and the courts that are run by elected officials, to include the sheriff's office, the DA, assessor, treasurer, the clerk recorder, and the district and justice courts. While not growing as fast as we did in the 20 years from 1982 to 2002, we grew 20,000 people in that 20-year period. We're still continuing to grow, and we're itching our way up to the 60,000 mark. And based on our growth management policy, we estimate this out every year, and it looks like the maximum population we could have in Carson City is 76,000 build out of all available property. So while many people think of Carson City as a retirement community, surprisingly, the age distribution is pretty even between the various age groups. This is great. We want the younger generations to stay in Carson City and raise their families. So where does the money come from to run Carson City? As far as the general fund, the 2 largest sources of revenue are property taxes at $29 million and consolidated taxes at almost 43 million. So together, those two account for 74% of the general fund revenues. So where does all the money go from the general fund? And I guess 2 words, public safety. Probably the number one thing residents look for in a community. So almost 50% of the city's general fund budget goes towards the fire, sheriff, juvenile probation and detention, and alternative sentencing. So that's 38 million in fiscal year 22. The next biggest category is 25%, and that's general government, and that includes the treasurer, assessor, finance, IT, HR. And then 8% goes towards culture and recreation, 7% for the courts, and 3% each for health and public works and landfill. So looking at the expenditure categories in the general fund, salaries and benefits account for 76% of all general fund expenditures. And that percentage has actually remained really constant in the 24 years that I've been with Carson City. So it makes sense. The Carson City's main function is providing services to the public. And the city has approximately 677 full-time employees, with 483 of those paid out of the general fund. So planning for the future, how does Carson City plan for the future? Last year, we finalized the strategic plan for the next 5 years, and that sets our priorities and outlines where the city should focus our energy and our resources. So the city's 6 strategic goals are economic development, efficient government, organizational culture, quality of life and community, safety, and sustainable infrastructure. So speaking of infrastructure, the next few slides are some of the investments that the city's making for the future. So back in 2014, while we were still recovering from the recession and the need to stimulate economic development in Carson City, the Board of Supervisors approved a levy of a 1/8% sales tax for public infrastructure projects. So we've been very lucky to be able to leverage that revenue source to secure very significant amounts of federal and state funding. I'm sure you've all seen the improvements that we did in the downtown. And the first of the city's corridor projects, the South Carson Complete Streets project, was finished at the end of 2020, I think right before the last session. And that project was financed 75% from federal and state funding. So now we're on to the East William Street. That's the next corridor to be improved. And in addition to the $2 million in federal appropriations that we were awarded for this project, Carson City was also selected as a recipient of a $9.3 million RAISE grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. This grant is one of the most competitive grants programs in the country, and this project was actually only 1 out of 90 projects that were awarded across the whole country. So I think this was a testament to the success of the South Carson Street corridor project, where we received about $7.5 million in Tiger grant funds for that project. Oh, go back to sorry, a little bit more about this. So the city uses a dig once approach. So with these large projects, we include critical improvements to the city's aging water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure, and also we do the undergrounding of the overhead power lines. That way we're not tearing up the road more than once, because we all know how valuable road funding is. So this project is estimated at $21.3 million, and it will stretch from Carson Street to the west all the way to I-580 William Street interchange on the east side of Carson. So in addition to the utility infrastructure improvements, the project will provide roadway, bicycle, pedestrian, safety improvements, as well as beautification improvements along, this is one of Carson City's primary commercial corridors. This is So the project is 53% federally funded, 21% is coming from that infrastructure tax, and 24% is coming from the utility funds. And we're currently at 60% design with construction to start in early of 2024. Sorry. So another very important infrastructure project is our Quill Water Treatment Plant upgrade. That's located on the west side of Carson City at the base of the mountains. So we rely on this plant to treat water from Kings Creek, Ash Creek, and the historic Marlette Water Lake system. So due to the changes in regulatory standards and the water quality that's coming from those sources, our 30-year-old system is currently not capable of treating all of that available water. So by updating this plant's infrastructure and water treatment capabilities, we'll be able to make greater use of all of our available surface water, and we'll be able to continue to safely and promptly meet the demand for drinking water in Carson City well into the future. As far as funding, the city's secured federal funding to supplement our city water utility funding. So $1 million is coming from water user fees, $1.5 million from federal appropriations, $3 million we allocated from the ARPA funding, and $7 million was from the issuance of bonds, so for a total $12.5 million project. And this is also at 60% design with construction to start in the fall. A new combined fire station, emergency operations center, and backup dispatch station to be located in the eastern part of Carson City was identified by not only the Board of Supervisors, city staff, but the public as well as the #1 priority in the city's strategic plan. So funding for this project consists of $3.1 million from general fund and the ambulance fund, $2 million again from federal appropriations, $4.3 million we allocated from our ARPA funds, and $8.1 million from the issuance of bonds, for a total of $17.5 million. That is at 10% design, and that construction will start early 2024. So we'll have lots of new projects when you come back next time, or new buildings. So we've got a lot of infrastructure projects happening. What about our housing situation? So recognizing the lack of affordable housing choices in Carson City, we identified property on the east side of town for the development of affordable workforce housing. We're providing the land at no cost, and we've partnered with a developer to construct 160 units of affordable housing. So it's intended to primarily house seniors and families whose income does not exceed the 60% median gross income in Carson City. And that's funded through private activity bonds, Home Means Nevada funds, low-income housing tax credits, and home funds. Phase 1 is currently under construction with 40 units dedicated to senior housing and the other 40 for family housing. And Phase 2 is set to begin at the end of 2023, and that will provide an additional 80 units for family housing. And it also needs to be mentioned that that has a really great view from that property. So how is Carson City tackling homelessness? In August of 2021, when we first started getting our ARPA funding, the Board of Supervisors approved our plan of expenditure on how we would where we wanted to use that funding. So this included services to address mental health and substance abuse treatment, crisis intervention and other behavioral health, and homelessness. So in recent years, Carson City has seen a significant increase for us in the homeless population. And the most recent point in time count was 69 unsheltered individuals. And that was from 2022, but I think they just did 23, and it's pretty much the same number. But the boots on the ground say the number is more likely around 200. So the Carson City Housing Committee was created to develop a comprehensive housing plan with the goal of assisting the Carson City homeless population in transitioning from being unsheltered to sheltered. So the housing plan includes 3 phases to assist individuals with obtaining independent and permanent housing. So phase 1, Survive, that focuses on street outreach services that are designed to build relationships and providing low barrier access to safe shelter. And then phase 2 is Stabilize, and that focuses on short-term housing and access to the wraparound services. And phase 3, Thrive, which provides transition to independent and stable housing. Last month, the city began to implement this plan by awarding ARPA grant funds to various entities that proposed a 2-year program or project that supported one of the phases in our housing plan. So in closing, if you want to get out and enjoy the outdoors, maybe not today, but Carson City has some pretty impressive recreational facilities. We have new tennis courts at Ross Gold Park it's a 7-acre neighborhood park in South Carson City, and it also has a universally accessible playground. Our outdoor recreation program offers snowshoeing, which is great this time of year, kayak day trips in Lake Tahoe, and all the equipment and transportation is provided. We also have almost 100 miles of trails with some pretty amazing views. And by the end of the summer in 2023, the Capitol to Tahoe Trail is expected to be complete, and that will add 10 additional miles connecting Carson City to the Tahoe Rim Trail, and also that'll create international connectivity with Carson City's trail system. So you will literally be able to walk from the steps of the Capitol to all the way to Canada. So that will be a great addition to our trail system. And I just want to thank you, and I hope you enjoy your time in Carson City.
Thank you for that presentation. Members, any questions? Seeing none, thank you again.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the presentation by Carson City. And next, we'll open up the presentation on Senate Bill 16, the hearing on Senate Bill 16, which revises various provisions of the Charter of Carson City. Whenever you're ready, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Stephen Wood, representing Carson City. And joining me today is Jason Woodbury, the Carson City District Attorney. We're presenting SB 16 to you today, which revises the Carson City Charter. The Carson City Charter Review Committee began its work in February of 2022 to consider potential changes to the charter that were submitted by both Carson City residents and city staff alike. The 7 members of the Charter Review Committee are Carson City residents. Each are appointed by the Board of Supervisors, the mayor, the assemblyman from District 40, and the senator from District 16, respectively. After deliberation at 3 meetings, the Charter Review Committee submitted a list of 5 suggested changes to the Board of Supervisors. The board approved those changes with a slight amendment, and those changes are before you today in the form of SB 16. And we have submitted to the committee the minutes of all of those meetings, if you care to go back and look and see what that discussion looked like. SB 16 is Carson City's one and only allocated bill for the 82nd session. So now, after that overview, I would like to pass it over to District Attorney Woodbury, who will walk you through the language of the bill, and then we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Jason Woodbury, Carson City District Attorney for the record. I want to thank the committee for considering the bill before you today. The bill proposes 5 amendments to the Carson City Charter. The first proposed amendment is reflected in Section 1. By way of background, Carson City is divided geographically into 4 political wards of equal population, as our city manager indicated. Following a census or at any other time when the population of any one ward exceeds that of any other ward by 5% or more, the Carson City Clerk must realign the wards to equalize the population. That realignment must then be approved by the Carson City Board of Supervisors. Existing law imposes a deadline, or an existing charter provision imposes a deadline for the completion of that process, and that deadline is January 1st of every general election year. That deadline became problematic for Carson City in 2021 due to the fact that the clerk cannot begin the ward realignment process until after the legislative redistricting statewide process is completed. Now, if the redistricting process is completed early enough, the January 1st deadline is not a problem. However, if the redistricting process pushes back toward the end of the calendar year, that can make it difficult and potentially impossible for the clerk to complete the ward realignment process by the January 1st deadline. For example, in 2021, due to the timing of the redistricting process, the Carson City Board of Supervisors had to schedule a previously unscheduled meeting on the last business day of the year to make sure that the realignment was approved by the January 1st deadline. And it is not hard for us to imagine a circumstance in which the redistricting process that you all go through is delayed for a fairly significant period of time through legislative stalemate or potential litigation, and meaning that our ward realignment process simply could not be completed by the January 1st deadline. In our research on the issue, we were not able to locate the origin of the January 1 deadline, and we did not find that deadline in any other city charter or statutory provisions. It appears to be unique to Carson City for some reason. The proposed amendment would remove the January 1st deadline and replace it with a deadline of 30 days before the non-judicial candidate filing period in the general election year. If, for some reason, the redistricting process makes that deadline impossible, the deadline is extended to the first day of the non-judicial candidate filing period. This amendment would bring Carson City into line with Nevada statute on the subject, NRS 293.209, which imposes a deadline to realign election districts that is the first day of the filing period for non-judicial candidates. The second proposed amendment is reflected in Section 2 of the bill. Under existing law, the terms of members of the Carson City Board of Supervisors expire at noon on the Sunday preceding the first Monday in January 4 years following their election. However, newly elected supervisors do not assume office until midnight of the first Monday in January following their election. So read together, these provisions create a 12-hour gap where the terms of the existing supervisors have expired, but the newly elected supervisors have not yet assumed office. The proposed amendment would eliminate that gap by changing the term expiration of the outgoing supervisors from noon to 11:59 p.m. And close that gap. The third proposed amendment is reflected in Section 4 of the bill, and that amendment is just a grammatical correction. The fourth proposed amendment is reflected in Section 5 of the bill. The Carson City Charter establishes the ordinance adoption process for the Carson City Board of Supervisors. That process requires the board to review an ordinance at 2 separate meetings before adoption. The process also requires publication of regarding the proposed ordinance after the first reading and then again before the ordinance becomes effective. In Carson City, we utilize the Nevada appeal for our legal publications, and at times, the existing process becomes problematic because the Board of Supervisors meets the first and third Thursday of every month. Some months have a fifth Thursday, which extends the time that the board can bring back the ordinance for a second reading. Additionally, the Nevada Appeal currently publishes only twice a week, on Wednesday and on Saturday. So those publication deadlines can also create a delay of a few days before the proposed ordinance is actually published. So these two relatively minor delays combined can create a situation where it is difficult and sometimes impossible to meet the 45-day deadline that the charter provision currently imposes for adoption of an ordinance. For this reason, we have proposed amending the deadline from 45 days to 60 days from the initial publication to the time when the ordinance may be finally adopted. In effect, this would give Carson City another meeting as cushion to work with and make sure we satisfy all the meeting and publication deadlines and requirements. The proposed amendment is modeled after the Las Vegas City Charter, which since 2007 has allowed an ordinance to be adopted up to 60 days after its first publication. Additionally, we have proposed eliminating the requirement that an ordinance be published before becoming effective and replaced it with the requirement that the ordinance must be published no later than 14 days after adoption. We believe this will allow us to attend to urgent matters, such as we experienced with the COVID situation, without having to resort to an emergency ordinance process, which by its nature allows for less notice to the public. The fifth and final proposed amendment is reflected in Section 6 of the bill, and a conforming change is reflected in Section 2 of the bill. Under the existing charter, if the office of mayor becomes vacant, the mayor pro tem, who is also a supervisor, becomes acting mayor. However, the supervisor does not actually assume the office of mayor and still holds his or her seat as a supervisor. This process created a problem for Carson City a few years ago when our mayor passed away. The mayor pro tem became acting mayor, but no one could be appointed to fill that supervisor's seat because he was still legally a supervisor and therefore there was no vacancy. As a result, the board was forced to operate for several months with only 4 members until the former mayor's term expired. The problem could have actually been worse because as the existing charter, under existing terms, it could allow that situation to last for 2 years or potentially even more, depending on the timing of the mayor's vacancy. To address this issue, the proposed amendment would actually have the mayor pro tem assume the office of mayor for the duration of the unexpired term of the former mayor. This would create a vacancy in the office of supervisor, which could then be filled and allow the board to function with full representation. The proposed amendment is modeled after the city charters of Sparks and Boulder City, which have utilized this process since 1975 and 1996 respectively. Sections 7 through 9 of the bill make conforming changes to statutes, and Section 10 of the bill would make it effective upon passage and approval. That concludes my summary of the bill before you today, and I would be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
And thank you for the presentation. Members, any questions? We'll start off with Assemblywoman Krasner, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Excuse me, Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. District Attorney Woodbury, my questions are in Section 1 of the bill. And Chair, with your indulgence, I just have a few questions, please. So it says in Section 1, Sub 3, that Carson City would be realigning districts whenever they feel that there's reliable evidence. So, I mean, normally, obviously, the legislature realigns districts, and we do it every 10 years. But what would be considered reliable evidence? That's my first question, please.
Mr. Chair, through you to Senator Krasner, Jason Woodbury, Carson City District Attorney.
And feel free to go direct, thank you.
Thank you. Jason Woodbury, Carson City District Attorney for the record. That is in existing law. There are some changes, but they're more formatting changes. But that concept that the clerk may choose to realign the boundary, the wards upon reliable evidence if there's a 5% difference, that exists in existing law. So I apologize, I don't really have a direct answer for you. To my knowledge, as long as I've been in Carson City, that situation has never occurred, where outside of the census process, the Carson City clerk has realigned boundary wards. The only situation where I can really imagine it coming up would be through an annexation kind of process, because outside of the census, you know, I'm not aware of it ever having come up before.
Thank you, Chair. I understand what you're saying. However, you're asking us to change the law here where generally the legislature realigns districts, and you're asking us to allow for Carson City to realign their wards based on reliable evidence, but I don't know what that reliable evidence is. So I really couldn't make a decision if I don't know what that reliable evidence is, and that's a new word here in the NRS. So I would need to know that. And then also when I look at Section 4, realigning the boundaries could happen any time in any year in which a general election is held during the period beginning 30 days immediately preceding the first day. So if you guys have reliable evidence, could you just do this every 2 years then?
Under the charter provision, if there was reliable evidence, yes.
But we don't know what the reliable evidence is.
Jason, I'm sorry, I should have said Jason Woodbury, Carson City District Attorney for the record. No, I don't know what that is because that process has never been engaged, but I'm more than happy to address the issue with the Carson City Clerk to gather more information and provide that to you, Senator.
Okay, and then just one final question, Chair, if I may. Does Carson City need the approval of the legislature when they do this, if they were to do it based on their reliable evidence, and it could be every 2 years? Do they need the approval of the legislature?
Under the existing charter and the proposed amendment, the Carson City Board of Supervisors would have the authority to realign the wards of Carson City without any approval by the legislature.
Thank you.
Senator Daley, please.
Thank you, Madam, or Mr. Chair. I kid. Along the lines of where we were just talking on the boundaries, so if I heard right, is that you guys don't have supervisor ward only votes, everybody's citywide, right?
Jason Woodbury, that's correct.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, I know a lot of the other jurisdictions have gone to the ward only in various things, but Carson City is fairly small and unique, where the supervisors act as city council and county commissioners all at the same time. So it is a little bit different. So the question is on the 5% difference, which is not uncommon. I know they have it in the Sparks Charter, and I believe for my colleague in Senate District 16, I believe they get that information. It's ongoing from the state demographer is one of the sources that they would use. There are a variety of other agencies that are keeping updates on populations and various things on the interim. And I know they've changed that mid-cycle in Sparks before. And they have similar language in their charter as well. So I don't really necessarily have an issue with that. But if everybody is in running countywide, I don't know that the timing of that makes all that much difference unless you were doing it to draw somebody out of a district. That would never happen, as there are other provisions that would prevent that.
Jason Woodbury for the record, I don't have any additional information to add. The only, for purposes of an election, the only thing that the wards pertain to is the fact that a supervisor has to live in the ward to run for that particular seat. But yes, it's all an at-large election for them.
Yeah, and I'm just, if it's not in the charter somewhere, and I appreciate the fact that you went through your charter committee and all that stuff. I know Carson didn't want one, but we made him have one anyway. And I think it works well. I've gotten good feedback over a period of time from that. But, so maybe you would delineate that if you did it in an election year, or you had to because of that you wouldn't be able to draw a sitting legislator out of their district. And I know you have to prove that, but it could be 4-1 on that. Anyway, I would think about trying to make sure that couldn't happen.
And this is Stephen Wood for the record. We'd be happy to do some additional research into the charter and see if there's anything existing and get back to you.
And thank you. Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you. If we could have you sit back. And at this time, I'd like to invite those either in Las Vegas or Carson City to please come forward wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 16. Seeing none, BPS, do we have anybody on the lines?
Chair, your public line is open and working, but you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. And now I would like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 16 to please come forward. Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, BPS, anybody on the lines?
Chair, you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. And lastly, anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position, Senate Bill 16, if you could please come forward. Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, BPS, anybody on the line?
Chair, you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. And at this time, if you have any closing remarks, this would be the time to do so. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 16. Thank you for the presentation, and if you could share that information, whatever you gather back, with the entire committee so that they have an opportunity to review that. Thank you again. Next, I'd like to open up the hearing on Senate Bill 20. Good afternoon and welcome. Whenever you're ready, please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Flores, and members of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, my name is Jennifer Berthume. I serve as the Government Affairs Manager at the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 20 on behalf of NACO, whose members represent all 17 of Nevada's counties. Senate Bill 20 addresses the issue of vacancies on local boards of county commissioners. Under current law, should a vacancy occur on a board of county commissioners, the governor would appoint a person of the same political party as the most recent holder of the vacant office. However, no requirement exists for consultation or coordination with the local government. SB 20 proposes to amend NRS 244.040 to allow for a board of county commissioners to establish a process via ordinance to fill vacancies that may occur on the board. If a board of county commissioners chooses not to create an ordinance process, then the governor would appoint to the vacant position, reverting to the existing process. This completes my presentation on SB 20. At the pleasure of the chair, I'm happy to take any questions the committee may have.
And we'll start off with Senator, and thank you for the presentation. We'll start off with Senator Goycochea, please.
Yes, thank you, and very intriguing bill. I guess I just want to make sure, it sounds like by ordinance, the Board of County Commissioners could install a process to where they would select and seat a county commissioner.
Through you, Chair Flores.
without going to the governor at all?
To Senator Goycochea. That is correct.
Okay. I don't mind saying that gives me a little qualm because some of the smaller boards, if you've got three-member boards, and there are several three-member boards of county commissioners in this state, the way this is structured, I guess I would like to see it kind of tweaked or amended a little bit where you went through the ordinance process and engaged, the governor some way and, to where you did have the consultation. But I get a little nervous when you have a three-member board and one resigns and then, well, number one, it could be very hard to pick the third one without going to the governor. You're putting this in an ordinance process. And then I also get concerned, you could go out a couple of years with a really stacked board and the voters would have nothing there. And again, 5 members, not so much, but a 3-member board in a small rural community, it could be a train wreck. And I'm a little nervous about that. I'd like to see this tweaked a little bit. Ultimately, even if we just called out a 3-member board or the smaller boards, there has to be some consultation. We've all seen boards that were 2-1 stacked, and that's why the one quit. And so then all of a sudden, then the other 2 can go ahead and we can bring a freight train. I'm a little apprehensive about the language you've got here, and I've met with your director and you as well. But after looking at it, I'm a little bit nervous. I don't mind saying the consultation piece of it, but ultimately in those smaller boards, I still think there would have to be some kind of oversight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Daly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know when you guys came and talked to me, thank you. I told you I hadn't read it yet. It's a short bill, so I did read it, looked it over. But my view is similar to my colleagues from Eureka. The smaller boards potentially have some issues. There are counties that have 3-person boards and various things. I know Washoe and Clark, much larger boards, 5, I think, and 7 in Clark County. But we're not talking about other boards. We're just talking about county commissions, not any subdivision of boards.
Through you, Chair, to Senator Daly, Jennifer Berthium for the record, just county commissions.
Just
yes.
county commissions. And the way I view it is, the way the language is written, it's like a blank check to the county. They can put whatever they want into their selection process and various things. So there's no minimums and there's no limits. So I think, I don't necessarily have a problem with the appointment, and maybe there has to be a pop cap or something for smaller counties to address that concern. But just to name a few, right? So it gives a blank check. You could set up a process. Obviously there's minimum qualifications. You could set up a process that would allow them to overlap districts or be from a different district, a different party. What type of application process should there be? What would be the time limits and some of that stuff? Would you have to do the selection? You can do interviews in a closed meeting, but selection would have to be in a public meeting. I think those are some of just the minimum things that would have to be prescribed. It says you can adopt the ordinance, but these are the things you have to put in the ordinance. So basically, the only thing comfortable giving you is ability to make the appointment and not have to go to the governor, but there has to be some guardrails and minimums and requirements and public process that is not going to be different in 16 counties. And I say 16 because I think you have to have a different process. We just talked and heard from Carson City. You would have to say except in Carson City because they have a completely different process in their charter for the filling of vacancies to the equivalent of county commissioners. So those are a couple of my comments. I don't know if you have any, but guardrails are needed. Can't let it go the way it is.
Through you, thank you, Senator. We'll take those into consideration.
And I think for the purposes of the committee, I think it'd be helpful that, and maybe I don't want to put you in any type of place, regardless of who the governor is. I think if we could use any hypothetical, 10 years ago, 14 years down the road, it doesn't matter. The point is, it might help understand NACO's kind of mindset in moving forward with this bill and your membership's rationale and logic. 'Cause, we're talking about, and I know Senator Daley brought up questions that, what guardrails rails do we have in place now, or better said, with this bill. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what happens now when there's a vacancy, what that process is like. Is there transparency in that process now? Who's involved in it? Because it could help us delineate between one and the other, right? Here's what we have happening today when there's a vacancy. And is that really the preferred method versus allowing for you all to create some ordinance and some rules? How does that typically look like? I'm assuming you have to have open meeting law in engaging in these conversations. I'm assuming you're going to be taking in public participation. I make that point only not necessarily to help or hurt your case, but I think it'd be helpful for us to kind of walk through the mindset of that particular scenario of what's happening now versus what you're hoping this will accomplish later. If you could maybe walk us through some of those conversations that you had.
Thank you, Chair Flores, for the question. Jennifer Berthium, for the record. Currently, the current process is that the governor appoints, and I do know historically, I just pulled up some historical information on that. So far, Governor Lombardo has appointed a Lyon County Commissioner now in 2023, and there's a Eureka County Commission spot that's currently open. Governor Sisolak, I could find 5 appointments that he did from 2019 to 2022. And I know that the only consideration now is of the same political party. I don't know in those instances if there was consultation with the local government in that process. I could not tell you, but I could get back to you and see what that was.
Senator Goycochea, please.
Thank you. And I've been involved in this process for a long time, including my own seat. I had to vacate a county commission seat to come to the assembly. So, and at that time, it was kind of an unwritten rule, but the party, whoever, in my case, it was a Republican Party, actually submitted 3 names, recommendations to the governor. He didn't have to do those, but again, that's not in statute. But again, that's what I'm kind of looking for in this. If we're going to deal with this, then let's put some, like you say, some sideboards to it, some guardrails to it. And I agree, but I am concerned, just like I stated before, that it really bothers me because you could have a 3 or a 5 member board, and if a member quit, sometimes it's for reason. And then if he steps out, really the voters have no say in the process, and you might have some personalities on that board that you're only going to be strengthening, especially in a 3 or a 5 member board. It can happen. And then you could go 2 years with the voters really not have anything. They would have an agenda that you couldn't deal with. So I'm all about putting some sideboards in the election process. You stated that, Eureka County's in the process right now. Well, that's been out about 6 weeks now. They don't have that's a 3-member board. They're functioning with 2. I heard last night, one of the other ones says, I'm done with this, I'm going to quit. So, again, we've got to get a process. I agree with you. It has to be a little cleaner, a little better. I just don't really know if I like a board being able to draw up an ordinance and saying, folks, this is how we're going to fix it next week. And I realize it's all public process. You've got to go to the hearing. You adopt the ordinance, and it might, you know how it is in these small counties. Nobody's really paying attention to the ordinance. Nobody shows up to the public hearing. But then somebody says, well, okay, we did that. I'm going to twist off. I'm gone. But we can select by process. So let's fix it a little bit while we're dealing with it. Thank you.
I think Senator Goycochea wants to be appointed to all the boards. Can we put that in statute? Senator Daley, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And some of the things, like you said in the conversation, having the appointment or having the option or just not having an ordinance going to the governor, there is no requirement for the governor to communicate or do anything other than the person has to be the same party. I'm sure there's other considerations. The person would have to be in accordance with the county commission charter, or whatever, not charter, it's a different rule, but they'd have to live in the district. There's certain things. They'd have to be a registered voter. So there are some other qualifications, and that's where it very vague is what is it, suitable person, right? So that suitable is just left undefined. But if you were looking for something, and I've seen it with city councils filling vacancies and various things, there's an option. You can look at any of the city charters, pretty much, I know Reno, Sparks, where they give themselves an option where they can fill the vacancy or they can hold an election if they wanted to fill the vacancy. Generally, they go for the other part where people do applications. And then they have an application, they have a process, they set, delineations. The city councils are nonpartisan, but the county commission isn't, so it would have to be filling the same party, living in the same district, like I said, some of those things. So, but I think you can get some basics out of almost any of the city charters on how they fill vacancies, so you don't have to start from scratch. But guardrails, otherwise it ain't gonna work. Just that way then we'd have 17 or 16 different rules, because Carson's got theirs in their charter apparently, on how you do it. And I think this would get everybody in line, and it would create some transparency. People would have a better idea. They'd know what the qualifications, requirements are to apply. And with any luck, you'd have multiple people applying and have a broad base of people to choose from.
Members, any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, again, thank you. And again, it sounds like the members are in agreement with you. They just want to ensure that we're not going to be appointing Senator Daley to every single board. With that, if I could have you sit back, and at this point, we'll invite those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 20 in Carson City or Las Vegas. Welcome, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Mary Walker, representing Douglas County, Lyon County, and Story County. We do rise in support of SB 20. This bill originally came out because in Lyon County, we had a vacancy. We had our member, Ken Gray, ran for election for the assembly. And so they had to go for months with just 4 members, which was very difficult. The process, as delineated by law currently, is just the governor appoints. There is no county involvement at all. So there's no participation from the community because it's not open meeting or anything. And yet you're selecting someone who's going to represent your community, but someone maybe hundreds of miles away is going to be the person selecting this person. There's a big disconnect there. So also, thank you, Senator Daley, for bringing up cities, because cities are able to appoint their members when there's a vacancy. Same thing with school districts. So this would just put us on the same, plane as the other governing boards of other jurisdictions. I think more than anything, what we'd like to see is a faster process. It be totally open, public, where we have the community, applications, that type of thing, so that we can be sure that we are picking the right representative. It's almost the opposite of open government when you have somebody making the decision on a very important local government decision without it being a public decision, without the members, whoever it is, talking about it in public before their community, in front of the newspapers. Instead, we have a very closed process where one person's making that decision without any open meeting law considerations. So we would like to open that process up to our public. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you. Members, any questions for her? And thank you for your testimony. Anybody else wishing to testify in Senate Bill, in favor of Senate Bill 20, Carson City, Las Vegas? Seeing none, BPS, do we have anybody on the lines?
Chair, your public line is open and working, but you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. At this time, anybody wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 20? Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, BPS, anybody on the lines?
Chair, you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. And lastly, anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position to Senate Bill 20? Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, BPS, anybody on the lines?
No callers at this time, Chair.
Thank you. And at this time, any closing remarks we may have? With that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 20. And next, we'll open up the hearing on Senate Bill 21. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chair Flores and members of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, my name is Jennifer Berthiaume, Government Affairs Manager at the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 21 on behalf of NACO, whose members represent all 17 of Nevada's counties. SB 21 proposes to amend Chapter 244 of NRS to adjust current population thresholds of 45,000 up to 52,000 to reflect the results of the 2020 United States Census. Last addressed by this body in 2011 on a much larger scale, this bill is much narrower in scope, but intends to address some matters affecting rural counties. Specifically, this would allow rural counties to continue business operations in a manner consistent with lower population density. We believe that the intent of this legislation would allow these counties to continue to serve the public efficiently while maximizing public resources with a continued level of public service their communities have come to expect. Mr. Chair, I know that it's standard procedure to outline section by section the proposed changes, but if it would be helpful to the committee, given the length of the bill, I can summarize the proposed changes. I will first highlight Section 1, which allows counties under the 52,000 cap to combine or separate county offices. Sections 2, 3, 8, and 12 adjust requirements for appraisers of real property. Sections 5, 9, 10, 13, 17, 18, 19, and 21 are permissive, allowing smaller counties the ability to do such things as have less restrictive standards for manufactured homes and create planning commissions. In addition, our proposal maintains the definition of rural for these counties. This concludes my presentation of SB 21, and at the pleasure of the chair, I'm happy to take any questions the committee may have.
And thank you for your presentation. Members, any questions? Senator Goycochea, please.
Yes, thank you. And we've got some other counties that are kind of on the edge here. Now, did you reach out, say, to Elko County? Would they feel that they would want to be in, they're over the 52 cap, but barely? Did you reach out to them and maybe they wanted to, maybe we should have went to 54,000? Again, they're your membership, I'm just asking.
Through you, Chair, to Senator Goycochea, Jennifer Berthiaume for the record. Yes, all of our member counties were consulted in the creation of this proposal. I believe as of the last census that Elko County was just over the threshold as well then. So they specifically did not have an issue.
So they didn't have an issue with it, they didn't want to be rolled down into the lower threshold, because again, we were talking 1,500 people. I didn't know what that was. All right, if you consulted with them and they're good, that's, they had their opportunity.
Senator Daly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious on which counties are above the 45 but below the 52 now. Is there one or is there two?
Through you, Chair Flores, to Senator Daly, Jennifer Berthiaume for the record. That would be two counties, Douglas and Nye.
Douglas and I, that's, thank you.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you again for the presentation. And at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 21. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Mary Walker, representing Douglas County, and they do support this.
And thank you. Anybody else wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 21? Seeing none in Carson or Las Vegas. BPS, anybody on the phone?
Chair, your public line is open and working, but you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 21? Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas. BPS, anybody on the line?
Chair, you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. And anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position for Senate Bill 21? Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas. BPS, anybody on the line?
There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And with that, any closing remarks we may have on Senate Bill 21? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation. We'll close out the hearing on Senate Bill 21. And last on the agenda is those wishing to join us for public comment. Is there anybody in Carson City or Las Vegas wishing to join us for public comment? Seeing none, BPS, anybody joining us for public comment?
Chair, your public line is open and working, but you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we have concluded today's agenda. I want to remind folk that we will not be meeting on Friday, so you can plan accordingly with your families. And we will be back next week on Monday. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.